Okay.
Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Planning Board in the City of Birmingham for Wednesday, July 9, 2025. Can we call the roll, please?
Scott Klein.
Present.
Robin Boyle.
Here.
Stuart Jeffries.
Here.
Bert Kozak. Daniel Sher.
Here.
Janelle Boyce.
Here.
Brian Williams.
Present.
Duncan Curry.
Here.
Nassim Ramin.
Here.
Carter Anderson. Olivia Betanzos.
All right, we are quiet. And for the record, Ms. Ramin will be a voting member tonight in place of Mr. Kozak. Let's move forward with the review and approval of the minutes from June 25th. Comments, corrections?
I'll move approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 25, 2025.
Motion, Mr. Williams. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Scher. Conversation at the board level? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion unanimous. Here we go. Chairperson's comments. We have a light agenda today, and it looks like we have a light crowd, so we're just going to dive right in to the study session zoning ordinance update request for proposal discussion. Mr. Dupuy.
Cool, thank you. So, as I mentioned in my email, I basically served you up a big, juicy nothing burger for this agenda in terms of analysis memo, what have you. I just threw a bunch of stuff at you. But it was for a purpose. I did mention that my initial plan was to bring the RFP, but I could not get it reviewed by the manager in time, and I could not get it reviewed by the attorney in time. And I was advised that those two things are sort of must-dos before we sort of post it publicly in a packet like that. I think that's actually quite sage advice anyways, so lesson learned. But what I wanted to do tonight, for as long or as short as you'd like to do, is still talk about that RFP. And I did a couple things as I promised, one being reaching out to Ferndale to get their information on their RFP process. Roger was actually really helpful over there in sending me not only their RFPs, but their evaluation systems, things like that. And ultimately, fairly similar to ours, I also included, scrolling a little bit, the last RFP, the last major RFP that we did in the planning department for the master plan update. I think if you thumb through them both, they're very different. And in particular, our request for proposals generally give consultants a lot more in this like profile summary intro section, a lot more background, a lot more history. I think we also do a lot more, I guess I'll say, prescribing than you'd see in other requests for proposals. I think based on general guidance that you see out there with requests for proposals, there's certainly places that prescribing specifics is essential. Easy ones like deliverables, it's important to be very clear about what you'd like. But there may be other places where it's better to be less prescriptive and let the professionals maybe, for lack of a better term, do their job a little bit. So I gave you what I feel are the big, most consequential sections of the RFP: the introduction, the scope, the submission requirements, the evaluation procedure and criteria, and the timeline and deliverables. If you'd like to, I'd stick to those 5 tonight. Everything else in the RFP is, dare I say, rather standard or boilerplate. So we're not going to be, for example, creating an agreement or a contract together. That's purely internal, purely with legal. But everything else, I think, is worthwhile to do together. So I don't know where you, frankly, want to start, Chair Klein, if anyone's been thinking about it, if anyone's read through any of the documents I gave you and feel as though maybe there's a short list of must-haves, I'd like to know. If there's things you liked, a few things you don't like, if you're interested in being prescriptive in some areas and not so much in others, I think those are the kinds of things I'm looking for. To close, though, you should know, although I didn't put it in here, the RFP is being drafted. We are basing it based on the general template that we have, that you saw in the packet with those sections. But the body of those sections is very much a malleable portion of our work. So nothing's decided. We're still ready to do it together. And I think maybe, Chair Klein, if I can say so, there were several of us absent at the joint meeting where we brought this to the commission. I think that they had some nice ideas and some suggestions, but nothing that was totally out in left field. I think that we have some work to do in terms of getting them comfortable with a project like this and what it means and what the results might be. Not necessarily a job for the RFP, but once that RFP gets posted and once we go through the consultant process, I think that's going to be a critical point, is trying to, I guess, make it a little bit more palatable for the general public. So, Scott, anything else about the joint meeting or generally?
Well, I guess I would add, everyone, and for those who weren't there, I want to say this in the right light. Our city commission does not delve in these areas like we do. And so I think it would be a mistake for us to assume that they had a really great grasp on what a zoning ordinance update is, what the requirements of doing so after a master plan are, and the like. So I would suggest that the two key points that came out of that were the communication, and let me get my notes here, it was communication not only with the commission, but with the public. And then little questions, about whether legal should be included in the scope of services, et cetera. I think to me it points to, in my experience, if you don't mind me just kind of jumping in a bit, I responded to RFPs like this for almost 30 years, and clarity of the scope of work, not leaving things open to too much interpretation because you're going to get 9 different submittals with 9 different scopes, and clarity of how it's being evaluated, the criteria you're trying to measure are the two biggest things, in my opinion. They always frustrated me when RFPs were just so open-ended that it could be a $500,000 job or a $5,000 job, depending on how you wanted to read it. And that's not going to serve anybody. So getting that scope of work, but then the communication of it. I think communicating it to the consultants is one thing, but I think communicating it to the city commission and the public along the way is going to be just so important to this not just going off the rails and turning into well, I'll keep it PG, turning into a bad thing. I guess that'd be my 2 cents up front. Anybody have any other thoughts? Mr. Chair.
So I've been in this seat for a couple of RFPs on the senior committee, several RFPs with various school districts. And the two things that have always mystified me are the criteria for evaluation. I've seen different people, look at 10 points for this, 5 points for this, but within those categories, I've seen people, look at the same thing and be way off on one side, way off on the other. No uniformity in what that, and it's fine to say criteria, but it rarely goes beyond 10 points for X, Y, or Z, and, so on. And, frankly, I've seen situations where people try and game the system because they like one person or consultant rather than another. They score that one really high and the others really low. That throws your averages off depending on how big the evaluative group is. So I guess maybe that puts a little bit more color on your sense of, giving clarity to what the criteria are. The other thing that that particularly struck me in the senior ad hoc stuff that we just went through is trying to think of an effective way to interview qualifying consultants. Because I sort of take this in two frameworks. One is, you're going through a paper process to see if somebody meets some minimum threshold. Are they, from a legalistic point of view, are they qualified bidders? But then within that, you can end up with very different firm approaches, very different people. So you want to interview them, but and Nick, maybe, do you know if the city commission wants to interview candidates?
I have a guess.
What's your guess?
My guess would be yes.
All right. So that created a big problem in the seniors, because if you have three consultants who are qualified, who folks think are okay, and you pass three on, is that an hour? Is that an hour and a half of commission time? Does the commission have the attention span to give the last one the same attention as the others? And so I think it would be a good idea for staff to talk to the city manager and get a sense of what the commission would really, having gone through this just recently in terms of architects and construction managers and owners reps in the senior center, what they really want to do, what they really want to see at the commission level. Because I think that would help us in our discussions, deliberations, whatever you want to call it, to structure either more or less work, right? I mean, maybe the commission just wants us to say who's qualified to move to the next step, or maybe they want us to delve into it more deeply. At the senior ad hoc, they pretty much wanted us to say who was qualified, and my sense was that it wasn't terribly effective at the commission level. So those two things are things I think we ought to, keep in mind.
Just reacting, I think that's a great point. Anecdotally, I have a friend that was a president of an architectural firm that bid on work in Birmingham a number of times. And he was, one night after sitting through a second interview with the city commission, after two interviews at the board or ad hoc committee that was picking the RFP, they decided to go with somebody else. And his staff forced him afterwards, as they were commiserating around a beer, to sign a napkin that said, "We will never bid work for the city of Birmingham again." I can't stress enough how bad a reputation our community has dealing with consultants. So if we want to get consultants in the door to actually do work for us, we should answer these questions. If the city commission wants to interview them, I don't want to interview them. I want us to rank them, score them, and say these are the top two or three or whatever we want to do. You go interview them. Now, I think that's a mistake, but that's the city commission's decision to make.
And just to kind of talk about the way in the school systems, what happened was that a committee, and the committee composition varied depending on what the RFP was, but a committee came forward with a single recommendation. And the board evaluated that, sometimes interviewed those people and sometimes not, depending on the board's take. But I, again, from having sat in this chair, my sense is that it's a more effective process if the commission is willing to allow not just this board, but maybe staff to participate in the evaluation process, to come forth with a recommendation of one favored candidate. I think that works better. It allows for deeper discussion. That would be my sense.
I agree. Mr. Jeffries.
Absolutely. I'll go just a half a step further and say I would recommend to them that they don't interview. They give us any things that they're really looking for. But, I mean, what is this board for? These are the people, I mean, Scott's seen more RFPs times a million since they've seen zero, I mean, for this kind of work. And it's been frustrating. The fire station the senior center, and there's others, and we've never done a postmortem on this, which we should do, because they've all been clusters. And so the one thing is so frustrating is most communities don't have this. We have high-level, respected, years and decades of experience that will work for free and help us on these processes, and we got it. We've never done one, but we got it. And that's just so frustrating, not only as somebody who volunteers time up here, but somebody who pays taxes, because I know a little chunk of the thing I'll be paying here in July will go towards, excess costs that we had on the senior center, because we didn't take that time and we didn't leverage the expertise we have. So I would say, if this is a board that's appointed by them to do this type of work, why would you have people who are elected who don't have these backgrounds if they've given us this? This to me is a clear-cut one. Some other stuff, there might be policy decisions. I don't on this. We're trying to find the best people to do this type of work. The second thing I want to say quickly is, as far as communication and the time I've lived in Birmingham, the one time I thought we just knocked it out of the park was when we were trying to get people to come to charrettes and all that. And we used so many different forms of communication. And that's one where we should go back and look at all the different things we did. I know it was a pain in the neck, but I can honestly tell anybody who comes up to me, I go, listen, we killed ourselves. So if you don't like the master plan, then you weren't listening, because it was everywhere. I mean, everywhere, so.
Mr. Boyle.
Two things quickly. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be at the last meeting or the joint meeting, so I can't really pick up on that. So first point is the way in which we did the master plan selection. I was a chair of a small committee that was set up in 2018, and we received, the RFP went out, and I'll just give you the process. We received, I think it was 8, and with the small committee that was composed of staff and members of this board, we reviewed the 8 with our own criteria that we had already discussed, and we selected 3. And we asked 3 to come in and make presentations to the subcommittee. It was a bit disappointing because people were away, people were not available, it didn't go particularly well at that point, but we did an evaluation, and we brought that to the committee, to the board, and presented that back to the board, and the board then made the selection. That's how we did it in 2008, if that's of any value. However, my second point is a little bit more different. So it's a question to the chair. Are we also able to discuss the non-procedural elements of this process tonight? And did you do that the other night? I mean, did you discuss the difference between just revising, updating the zoning ordinance, or reforming the zoning ordinance? Did you use words like update, reform, revise?
Audit.
Revise, update. We did not go to the level that I know you're asking us to go to, because frankly, no, at the joint meeting, it was very clear, and again, I want to be careful I say this because I'm not attempting to be negative here, but it was very clear that the City Commission doesn't have a great handle on what we're trying to do with this. One of the things as I mentioned, communication, and I've said this to Mr. Dupuis, is that we need to, at the very beginning, before we even put the scope together, we need to have a clear understanding here. What are we required to do legislatively? What are we looking to do because they were recommendations of the master plan that we know we're going to implement, because there's, not large scale, they're structural or things with the ordinance. There are the elements of the ordinance that we know that are
Because the planner is
lacking, where the ordinance itself may be difficult to understand or has loopholes that we've all found, these little things that we've talked about. And quite clearly, there's a bucket at the bottom that we have to decide whether we're going to even discuss. You know, there are elements, long-range recommendations that we may just say, that's not part of this project.
Right.
And we need to be clear about that from the very get-go.
Right. Okay. And that brings me
But we have not done that.
Right, and that brings me to my third point. I'm the only person here that was here when we revised the zoning ordinance most recently, in living memory, if I can say that. And I can tell you that I was quite surprised how little reform there was. It was almost all procedural. By that, I mean we introduced the idea of the diagrams that you can still see that are in the ordinance. We did the what's the technical term? Linking.
Hyperlinks.
Hyperlinking. That was a big deal. Hyperlinking. It was a lot of clearing up and tidying up, but we didn't do major reform. And the reason, and you all know that, is because we've got underlying zoning and revised zoning that still exists, which has been with us for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one of my fundamental questions is, are we trying to overcome that history, or are we prepared to let it linger for another 25 years?
Well, I mean, I don't see anybody jumping. My answer would be there are elements that we are definitely going to try and tackle, at least in my mind. There are elements that I don't think we're prepared to get into. And I'll say one out loud. I don't think we're ready to study ADUs, personally. Now, that's a personal opinion, but that's something that's why we have to come to an agreement on what's in these different buckets, as I like to call them. There are elements of this that we do have to tackle.
Sure.
The whole underlying zoning issue. I mean, the master plan recommended changing that, right?
Right, did.
So yes. Ms. Boyce?
In reading what you put in the packet here, Nick, with Ferndale's RFP, I noticed that they came up with a couple of points where they, sorry, let me get to my notes. There's section C where they identified key issues. I know those aren't our key issues, but I wonder if it might not be helpful for us to come up with what we think our key issues are. In addition to that, their public engagement part, they also identified specifics in their public engagement that they were that are important to them as a city, and therefore, led the way for the responses to the RFPs to come back consistently, I think. So I know what I think some of those things might be, but I wonder if that might be something for us to discuss, or maybe you've already planned that and you have these bullet points and what we haven't seen yet, but it just seemed like a good way to me to get specific about information that we were wanting back, but not too specific at the same time.
Mr. Williams?
I was struck by the Allegan RFP, and then specifically Scope of Services 1, which pointed out that their outside consultant, who fulfilled the role of their planning department, undertook an audit of the zoning ordinance in the context of the recommendations from their plan before they sent the RFP out. We haven't done that. We have not really looked at the plan
That's fair.
and analyzed what do we think needs to be addressed. Audit the ordinance in the context of the recommendations, which we all, mostly, not all, concurred in. We haven't done an audit. I really don't think it's appropriate for us to ask the consultant to simultaneously do an audit of our existing ordinance in the context of the plan. I think we ought to be looking at them to be suggesting implementation strategies. But we got a big hole here that we haven't addressed, in my view, before the RFP goes out. And the reason I say that is if we ask a consultant to do both those things. Analyze the code, and in the context of the plan, which was approved, and then the bill's going to be horrendous. And the Allegan people really sort of hit it on the head. They had an outside consultant instead of Nick to do that, at least from an initial standpoint. Here are the 25 things that we need to address in the ordinance based on the recommendations in the plan. And we sort of took the plan and got adopted, and then we haven't really done much with it in the last few years.
So I have a question for that, because I think you raise an excellent point. We had a matrix of recommendations
Yes, we
from the master plan.
We do.
And there were a number of those, not all, a number of those that dealt with zoning, right? If, and again, this goes back to my thought on these buckets that I keep talking about, that I think this is aligns with your idea. Isn't that a good starting point for what the master planning consultant said, or zoning ordinance was either lacking or
Yes.
having an issue with?
But to me, that's our job before we go out with the RFP.
Well, agreed. I'm just suggesting, haven't we started, in a way, started it with that work?
Yes.
And then it's our job to refine that into a.
Right.
Okay.
And we should, in my view, that should be part of the materials that we, in effect, publish, that we want people to come
Yes.
and, in effect, bid on.
Yes,
But we haven't done it. We haven't completed it.
Correct.
We started it,
fair.
and I can't even remember what it said because it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Ms. Boyce?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. In studying for tonight, I went back through the master plan, and after each section, of course, there's a summary of key actions.
Right.
And, I mean, it's like the work is almost done for us in some ways, because it's so well detailed and spelled out exactly, what needs to be done as far as zoning goes. And, I mean, it was really nice to have that. I think that definitely we need to use that to look to see where we're going to go.
So I guess what I'm suggesting is.
Really well done.
In the interim, or before the RFP is finalized, and look, we should be doing that, bringing that back before us. I'd rather have us spend time on that task as opposed to just worrying about the RFP and the interview process. We're a couple months at least away from that. In the meantime, we can get back into where we were, and which we didn't finish. Now, those are my only comments.
No, I think they're right.
And Nick, I think that ties right in with the idea of like what we need to do, what we want to do, and what we may not be doing. It ties right into that communication plan, the same kind of overarching areas that we're going to be touching and not touching.
You know, there's an interesting sentence that in this Allegan thing, you can all look at it. It says that the audit, once completed, will outline ordinance provisions that must be adjusted to fulfill the goals and objectives of the city's master plan. But it assumes that the audit's completed before the RFP goes out.
No, I don't know that that's the case.
Say that again.
I don't know that that's the case. I haven't read it lately, but the way you read it, it's telling the consultants that before you get to work, it'll be completed, not necessarily before you bid.
Right, you're right. But it's still, we're not asking the consultant to do the initial audit.
Yeah.
I would argue to Mr. Williams' point, though, that the better clarity we have on what that means, the better we're going to get. Otherwise, consultants are guessing.
Yeah.
I agree. But so let me throw this back into the mix. So this was done last in 2000 what?
7.
Okay, so 18.
That was just the Triangle District, by the way. So late 90s, 99, 2000 was the big downtown.
Was it 99, 2000?
All right, so 25, it last happened 25 years ago.
Yeah, so my guess at 25 is more accurate than my actual memory.
So
Wow. Well,
That
there
may-
you go. I rest my
You were
case.
young.
I rest my case.
That makes me lean more comprehensive rather than just fixing stuff up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So I had another question for to what extent, this is driven by a whole lot of thinking over the past week. To what extent does context affect the way in which whoever does this work, the consultants, they live in the world of contemporary planning. So that context will affect the way they think about what happens here in Birmingham. So I would argue that we do think seriously about the bigger questions because they will be thinking about them. I mean, if you look at just MAP and what they've done, Michigan Association of Planning, the report they produced, the statements they've made, the workshops they're having, they are at that larger policy questions. Never mind going to the Florida, California, Oregon's, Minneapolis's of this world. I mean, it is happening. It is with us. It is being discussed. And they're going to bring that, the consultants are going to bring that to the table.
I guess before I respond, I guess I would need to, again, have this matrix in front of me of what we're asking to do and what those items of potential study that you're referring to are. If that list of study items is 12 items long and really into details and discussions that are going to be intense, do we have the budget? Is that what we really budgeted for? I get what you're saying. I'm not disputing. But I guess I'd like to reserve my judgment until I see let's put on paper what we know we want to do and what these other study items are so that we can discuss.
Can I ask you, Robin, forgive me, Stuart, on this note? Because listening to you guys talk, it seems like you might be talking about two different things. Scott, I think you might be talking about what's being presented in our master plan. And Robin, I feel like you might be talking about everything that's not. All the best practices, all the best planning practices, the things that are happening elsewhere, and how do you manage them both together? Because I can think of things like, I don't know that I even want to say, because I don't want to get anything out in the ether that we're not doing. So maybe I won't say.
Right.
But all of the experiences that these consultants are having in hundreds of other cities that they're going to bring here that isn't enumerated in our master plan, and how do we provide a context that sort of funnels them towards a purpose, I guess? I don't know if that's what you're saying or not. I'd like to know.
I think, no, I'm not separating our master plan from that. I'm thinking that we went through an extensive master plan process that raised a number of important issues that are being found in other communities across the nation. And to be honest, lots of them are exploring the implications that they have for their cities, and some have gone the whole way and done a complete revision of their zoning ordinances. They have completely, and these are the headline cases. So for every Portland or Miami or Minneapolis, there's a partial change occurring in Dubuque and Allegan and Ferndale. Where do we fit into that? That's what I'm asking. Across a variety of topics, which were raised during the master plan. Some of it actually in the master plan words, but a lot of it through public engagement. Like people saying, why are we allowing such big houses? Let's take something like that, Big Feet. These big white or black and white boxes, which we are allowing in the place. I mean, the average household getting the average floor space of a house built today in Birmingham, I would guess it's in excess of 3,500 square feet, maybe 4. We know that people were up in arms at that and talked about it. Some people talked about the design elements. They don't like the big black boxes or white boxes. They wanted something else, and we pushed against that. That's just one of many elements. Are we going to deal with that in this zoning revision or not?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Sorry,
Just on the budget thing, my personal point of view is the city's not on its last dime, and we should recommend what we think is right. 25 years is a long time, and, I think somehow they could figure out how to do it. We carry 44% of the general fund, like in a rainy day fund, the recommendation is 17%, we'll probably find a couple bucks in there. But I think the point is just, we should recommend what we think is right, and if you push it off a year, or they have to take it from another bucket or whatever, that's not our job, but we should recommend what we think is right.
We're not going to know that till we get our responses back,
Right.
frankly. So once we get that,
We're not going to know that
we can
yet.
kind of see what the environment's like. If what we've got is enough, or if we do need to ask for a little
Matrix
more.
right away.
I mean, we got a little more on the master plan.
Mr. Williams?
So
We did.
I would simply say we need to pull the matrix out of hibernation and get at it
Yeah.
right away before we even think of finalizing the RFP.
Agreed.
I mean, we got to refresh our recollections.
Good.
Yeah, we do.
Question is, do we have staff time who could actually do a content analysis of our own master plan and just pull the words out?
Well, the answer is yes. I think it'll have to come in little pieces. Like, I don't know that we can get that all together for you by July 23rd, but I don't think anybody's asking that either.
No,
So-
and I don't think we can do it all in one sitting. We can't. But, on the other hand, I don't want to indefinitely delay this, and I think that's really the first stage that we have to get to. And we need to get at it soon.
I'm worried we're starting to lose the forest for the trees here, though. We have a master plan that identifies, as Ms. Whippleboy stated, 18 dozen recommendations that relate to zoning and the zoning ordinance, things that need to be studied, like Mr. Boyle just talked about. They're already written down. This is not an analysis of our zoning ordinance. They already did that to some degree. We have a list of things that are buried in a bigger list of other things. We've already parsed it out to the different boards to some degree.
Yep.
Grab those action items, grab those recommendations, the ones that relate to what we're trying to do, and put them on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That won't take a month.
No.
Do that.
Yeah.
We can throw it up there, and we don't have to get into every single one of them, but we can see there's a pattern, okay?
Right.
All of these things are just real simple. We're going to review, okay, boom, done. Here are the ones. Do we want to do this? And if we're going to do it, how are we going to do it? Are we asking the consultant to do a lot of data research and go out in the field, or are we going to do that? Or what,
No, valid.
Let's get them up.
why don't we just start talking that way, right?
Right.
I think you're right.
I think you're right. No, I'm not against you.
Yeah.
And I think Brian would agree with that.
That's what we got to do.
process.
We got to get at it.
Hey, if nothing.
And then let's
nothing
get it up
else,
on the
just start.
screen.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that going through with fine-tooth comb and saying, okay, in zoning section such and such.
Yeah.
I don't think that's even what Allegan was talking about.
No.
I think Allegan didn't have what we have, this list of things. And I think we revise this, you and the team look at that internally, I think personally, you're going to be surprised at how neatly they're going to start to fit into this scope of work.
Yeah, and I think if I can refresh memories a little bit, so Scott's been using the term buckets, so I'll just continue using it.
Sorry to hear.
We have the pile separated into two buckets right now. We called it at the time like a short-term and long-term, like a what can we do during the update and what do we need to take more time with buckets. There's probably more sorting we can do, and I think
Yes.
that's probably where we are. To whoever made the point about we've already started that, maybe it was you, Brian, about we started it, we just didn't get as far.
We didn't finish.
So I think we're closer than you think.
Well, we didn't finish, that was the
Yeah.
point.
But if something could be put together that we can look at as a group and discuss,
Yeah.
I think that would be valuable.
And I would like to see those longer-term items, too, in a separate category, because I think, thinking about what Mr. Boyle said, even if we look at them and say, oh, boy, that's a major league study that is outside the realm of what we're trying to do, we could at least solicit input from the consultant on best practices somehow, right?
Right.
I mean, at the very least, we can get something from them that will help us in the future if we decide that it's not part of our current. And maybe we'll look at it and say, no, you know what, we can do that. So let's not throw it away yet. Let's put it in that separate list and look at it all.
So what I would do is I would take those matrices that we had, I'd cut all the other noise out of it and just focus on the ordinance and bring it back.
Yeah, so Ms. Boyce, you were, for instance, summary of key actions, is that what it
Yeah,
was?
page 18 and 19 of the Birmingham plan has
Oh, yeah.
has a summary of key actions. It has specifically the number one thing here is zoning code updates, and followed by probably 20 bullet points.
Yeah.
Some of which I can look at right now and know are not something we would probably be talking about.
course.
But, I mean, and then beyond that, when it goes further in the summary of key actions to things that would not pertain to the zoning updates.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's here.
Oh, yeah.
So we just have to look through them each, I think, and decide what makes sense to us. Because I know some of these don't, but most of them do.
Yeah.
And a lot of them overlap, so,
I mean, it, right here, I mean,
It's here.
we've got these words that are potentially impactful,
Yes.
that we need to either say, yes, we want to include this in it, or we have to be ready to say to the consultants, no, that's not how we want them to go. And the words are there. They may be slightly softened because of the process of the master plan, but they're there.
Right.
Stuff is there.
So let's get the list up.
Let's get moving.
Pretty clear, Mr. Dupuy?
Clear enough. I think I'll take advantage of Mr.
But that-
Klein, your
that's not the RFP.
abundance of free
That's our
time, and
job.
we'll continue to collaborate,
Absolutely.
as this goes on, so we can,
Oh, he's chairman has done.
I do have one other, just more procedural, technical point with regard to the RFP, but far be it for me to not love everything about our friends down at Ferndale. But I think the scope of work and the things that they had were far too light. I mean, it was really just kind of tell us what we were going to do. We want you to update our zoning ordinance.
yeah.
Okay, great.
There's a very stark contrast between that.
We need to be clear, and I think we're getting there with what we're talking about.
Right.
Two, when we look at ours, I guess I will just say I found it rather odd. I do have a little time on my hands, and my job at the company was to review all the terms and conditions, so I read ours. I found it really odd that the city of Birmingham didn't require, unless I missed it, professional liability insurance. And they refer to everything as a contractor, which is code for its, an RFP that's written to buy widgets or have someone cut the lawn, not provide professional services. So I'll just throw out there, perhaps someone should look at that, because I don't know why you wouldn't
Yeah.
want professional liability insurance for a $200,000 zoning update.
To be fair, this was, 2017 era, and they have been revamped.
Okay.
I believe it's in there, but
Okay,
For manager.
fair nonetheless.
sorry.
Just another quick question.
Good comment.
Remind us, I mean, there's a thing called mitten, right?
Yeah.
And these things go out on mitten. Are we allowed to be more proactive? Is that a good or is that a bad thing? I'm genuinely asking a question, and Scott, you can help us with there maybe. I mean, do we reach out to folks that we know have done good master plan reforms, zoning ordinance reforms, or do we let the market, sort of this,
I think
the
what
ether do it?
the distinction that's been made to me in the past, and you let me know in your professional experience too, is we couldn't approach consultant X and say, hey, here's the RFP. We'd have to say, hey, just so you know, we posted an RFP to Mitten, go check it out. So you can do that. We couldn't
Okay.
play favorites or
Okay.
our peers, though we're playing favorites by sending them RFPs directly, but we can direct them towards Mitten.
But when you do that, you have to be very clear that this is a personal suggestion that you individually are making, not from the sanction of any part of the city, and carries no promise of work favoritism or anything else. That's the one thing that, under our ethics ordinance, you got to be really, really careful to not make it clear you are not speaking when you say to somebody, hey, look at Mitten, that you're not speaking as a city official, which is a defined term in that ordinance.
And I can verify what our council is the most comfortable with before I tell
I'm
you
not
a
saying
final
anything,
answer, but this all seems like sage advice to me.
Except the guy sitting there. Okay. I think we know what we got to do, right?
Okay. I'm just looking for the biggest pool possible.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That's all
We
I'm
want,
asking.
we want a good number of bids.
Yeah, the more the,
Big
no, maybe not the more
All
the
right,
better.
so
but
Nick, we need
good
clarity on the way that we're going to select, right? And whether the city, how the city commission wishes to proceed in that regard. They've heard our recommendation. We need some clarity. We need clarity on the scope, this matrix that we've talked about. There've been a few other points that we've discussed. Is there anything else that we've missed or anything on the points that anybody wants to bring up at this point? Nick, any other questions you had?
What's our timing?
Perfect
That's always
segue.
my question.
I'd like to ask you, because you know it's coming on the 23rd, the 479 project, are you going to have the energy, or do you want to wait till August 13th? I can fill my
August
time.
13th.
I can make my time productive in that interim space. Sure, it pushes our anticipated timeline back a little bit,
I
but
recommend later.
No, I don't. That's just going to get us into more.
All right.
or do you want to have an interim step on the 23rd, or maybe we can just talk about it later, Chair Klein, and just mull it over and see what interim step might even mean, but.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we're going to be here a long time on the 23rd, and it's going to be it's not going to get the attention it deserves. I don't like waiting that long. Perhaps you could check with the city attorney and city manager. Is there an issue with individually sending us kind of an update, an unofficial update, for us to review just on our own and provide feedback to you without copying everybody, just individual feedback if we have it, to help just prep us on the metrics? I don't want to do anything out of turn. We'd still have a meeting on it, but I don't know if there's any value to that. If anybody else.
So yes, I can ask her. There's also other methods, like we could not make it an item of business, and I can just provide you a staff report at the end, a communication more, so that I can get you started thinking about things. We don't have to discuss it that night. It's just an easy way to get,
You mean on the 23rd?
yes.
I was going to make an alternative suggestion that if we were to wait until August, 13th, it gives you more time to have a serious dive into this and produce some material
Yeah.
that we get 4 days, 5 days before, which is a spreadsheet, basically, saying these are the recommendations that included zoning changes in the master plan.
Right.
And we've got that.
Well,
we
the
analyzed it,
13th meeting, we're liable to see a draft RFP at the same
I
time.
would hope so at that point,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'd have sort of a two-pronged meeting.
Yeah.
On the
It'll be a
13th,
long
you're saying?
Yeah,
That could
yeah,
work?
maybe. Other opinions? Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I don't think we can do it on the 23rd.
All right, Nick, let's target the 13th and try to have as much not wrapped up, and as much pulled together for us.
Ready.
Thought process laid out, things like that. Maybe even trying to get some answers from the city manager on process, so that we're actually having a more detailed discussion on nuance at that point.
Okay.
Good questions. Okay, and if we wait to the 13th, that gives me more time to
Yeah.
do that specifically, which
Exactly.
is helpful. All right.
Okay.
Cool.
Good discussion. With that, I didn't see any pre-apps, project updates. Any questions?
Just going to quickly interject that there is a hand raised from a member of the public.
Oh, my goodness, I
Thank you, Laura.
apologize,
Thank you for
member of
that.
the public. Please do forgive me. We will go back and I will open it up to the public. And Larry, I see your hand is raised. Let's unmute him. And Larry, please introduce yourself and provide your comments.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening to you all. My name is Larry Ling. I live at 644 Bird Avenue. And you may recall me, if you saw me in person, I've come before you folks a few times in the past regarding the one specific aspect of the 2040 plan. I've also done the same to the City Commission. And as you're starting to prepare the RFP package, and if Mr. Dupuy is going to list out all the items that were included in there that would pertain to zoning, there's one in particular that I would ask that it not be considered or not be included in that RFP, and that is the one that talks about setting up an activity scene along the north side of 14 Mile Road between Grant and Woodward. For a couple of reasons. Right now, that's all zoned as R3, and the way it's written in the 2040 plan, it would open it up to R4, R5, R6, R8, and a TZ1, a transitional zone. And if you look at the definition of activity scene, it says enable infill development in conditions that are not conducive to single-family housing. I would simply point out that that entire stretch is already single-family housing, so it is clearly conducive to that, and changing it to allow for multi-family or even businesses there, strip malls, and we don't need any more strip malls. It doesn't seem to me to be an effective way to enhance the desirability of our community, and specifically, it would be doing it just on the backs of the folks like me, and it's a NIMBY for sure, who live on Bird Avenue, which backs up to that area. So, as I've said before, if we as a community wanted to go forth with that kind of change, then I suggest we do it everywhere in Birmingham, where it is currently R3. If we think it's a good idea for one area, one small area, then let everybody else share in that same benefit. So that's my request, is to, not to include that particular request for the reasons I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public? Again, I do apologize for jumping past this. Any other members from the public wish to comment? I don't see any other hands going up. All right, we'll bring it back to the board. I didn't hear any questions on the projects agenda for next time. I think we all know what's on the agenda next time. I think we've got a quorum.
On the 23rd?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool, everybody.
And I think I heard we've got it,
I'm not here.
It's not here.
right.
Yeah, and Naseem will have to recuse. so-
Correct.
Wait a second.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's at least 6.
Wait a minute.
Bert? Well,
Maybe.
we shall see. Who's to say? Who's to say?
Who's to know?
All right. With that,
Anything else on the?
any other business before the board?
I have a question.
Mr. Dupuy?
All I need is a show of hands because my timeline is shorter than I anticipated. Most of you probably know that the APA National Planning Conference is coming to Detroit
Yes.
in April. We made the short list for a mobile workshop for that conference. Is there anybody in this room that would be interested or willing to participate? I'll call it as a guide or as a co-guide for a tour.
A walking tour of the city?
We'd have several stops. I don't have anything else. But
What's the
whether you're
date? What are the
What were
dates?
dates?
late April,
Late
in the 20s.
Yeah.
Could Griffin Club be two of the stops?
Nice.
Can we drive?
Actually, maybe we might go.
There's
for
an
the
indoor
rail.
and an outdoor of Griffin Club. That's right there.
We did one for the ULI back when the ULI came to Detroit, and we did a morning we did a bit of Troy with Rip, and then Birmingham with Jana,
Uh-huh.
and then we went to Ferndale. And we had public, private in each one with a bus. It was tight, it was hard. We used the library; they were great. So it's been done and works fine. So yeah, I'll participate.
Okay.
April, lady.
I will likely participate. I need to defer my schedule, but I'm thinking I'd be able to.
Okay. I'll reach out with more information.
Late April's okay with me. Early April's not.
Either way, you're going to know all the deets, whether you have to do something or not is really what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay,
Are
cool.
you doing it just Birmingham, or are you going to take them outside Birmingham? Maybe.
At this point, whether or not it fleshes out this way, but they might do a Ferndale, Royal Oak, Birmingham stop and,
Woodbury thing?
and like tell the stories of these cities and comp them a little bit.
Cool.
So, yeah,
Be good.
All right.
cool, thank you.
Any other business?
No.
Seeing none. Meeting adjourned. Wow.